The greatest message I could ever give to you is that one simple thing. Yes, you can grow. I say it with all of my heart. I know in my mind that man was designed for accomplishment, that he's engineered for success, that he is endowed with the seeds of greatness. You can start from where you are with what you've got. And so long as you build on a moral foundation, I believe you can get anything you really want if you'll just help enough other people get what they want. I'm going to share a story with you. I think it's the greatest story that I've heard in my lifetime. The story goes back nearly 13 years. I was speaking in Kansas City. And there I met a man. His name is David Lochte. He said, Zig, when our son was born, our joy knew no bounds. Because we already had our 2 daughters, now we had our son. The family was complete. But he said it wasn't long before we knew something was wrong, because his head hung too limply on the right side of his body. But the family doctor said he would outgrow it. We knew better, so we took him to a specialist. The specialist diagnosed his condition as a reverse of club's feet and treated him for that. But he said, we knew, Zig, it was more serious. We took him to one of Canada's top specialists, and after an exhaustive examination, the specialist said, this little boy is a spastic. He has cerebral palsy. He's never going to be able to walk or talk or count to 10. I'm going to suggest that you put him in an institution for his own good and for the good of the, quote, normal members of the family. Brother Byrne looked at me and he said, you know, Zig, I'm not a buyer, I'm a seller. I could not buy the idea that my son was going to grow up being a vegetable. So we took him to another doctor who told us the same thing. And then another and another and yet another and another until 30 doctors said there is no hope. Then they heard of a Dr. Pearlstein down in Chicago. They got an alternate appointment so that when someone else canceled, they could have that appointment, because Dr. Pearlstein was booked 2 years in advance. And 11 days later, a little boy from Australia canceled, and they went to Chicago. Dr. Pearlstein examined David perhaps as no child has ever been examined before. And when he finished, he said, this little boy is a spastic. He has cerebral palsy. He's never going to be able to walk or talk or count to 10 if you listen to the prophets of doom. But he said, I want you to know that I am not problem conscious. I am solution conscious. And yes, I believe there is something that can be done for this boy if you are willing to do your part. Well, obviously, Byrne and Elaine Lochte said, Doctor, tell us what to do. We will do anything. And the doctor and the therapist and the nurses spelled it out in minute detail. They said, you're going to have to push this little boy beyond all human endurance. Then you're going to have to push him some more. You're going to have to work him until he falls. Then you're going to have to pick him up and work him some more. You got to understand that there is no stopping point. That if you ever stop, he goes back. You got to understand that there might be months and even years when you will be unable to detect any change, but you got to stay with it. And one last thing. Don't ever give him therapy in the presence of another victim of cerebral palsy. Because if he sees them taking therapy, he will inadvertently pick up those awkward movements. You see, we become part of what we are around. Whether it's moral or immoral, whether it's good or bad, stay with it long enough and it's going to rub off on you. The Lochtes went home. They built a little gymnasium in the basement of their home. They hired a physical therapist and a bodybuilder. It took them a lot of months, but one day David Lochte could move the length of his own body. It took them several years, but one day the therapist called Bernie home and said, I believe David is ready, and Bernie rushed home. And David Lochte was down in the basement and on a little mat getting ready to do a push-up. As that little body started to rise into the air, the emotional and physical exertion was so great there wasn't a dry inch of skin on that little body. And when he finished that one push-up, Mother and Dad and little David and the sisters and the therapist and everybody broke down and shed those tears, which so eloquently say that happiness is not pleasure. Happiness is victory. The story, ladies and gentlemen, is even more remarkable when we know that one of America's leading universities had examined this little boy and said there are no motor connections to the right side of his body. He has no sense of balance. He will have extreme difficulty even being able to walk and stand straight. He'll never be able to swim or skate or ride a bicycle. On October the 23rd, 1971, my wife and I had the privilege of flying to Winnipeg, Canada to attend the bar mitzvah of little David Lochte. Oh, how I wish you could have been there. How I wish the television cameras of the world had been clearly focused on what we saw as this little boy walked to the front of the synagogue, tall and straight and strong. I wish you could have heard him as he uttered those words that moved him into the manhood of the faith of his forefathers. I wish you could have seen what we saw, knowing what we knew, because you see, at that time he had done as many as 1,100 push-ups in a single day. He had run as much as 6 miles non-stop. He was shooting golf in the high 80s, one of the best table tennis players in Winnipeg, Canada. He had entered as a 7th grader St. John's Ravens Court School for Boys, where this little boy, who was never going to be able to count to 10, did quite well in 9th grade mathematics. February 1974, he qualified for an unrated $100,000 ordinary life insurance policy. So far as we know, the first and only time this has ever happened. And I tell you the story of David Lochte because it involves so many of the principles in which I believe. It begins with the right foundation of honesty and character and faith and loyalty and, yes, love. Oh, what a love story this one is. You see, every night this little boy used to have to put his braces on, and every night he would say, "Dad, do we have to put them on tonight?" Or, "Mom, can't we just leave them off tonight?" Or, "Do we have to put them so tight?" And you mothers and fathers know what I speak of when you have a little boy with tears running down his cheeks, pleading, "Don't put them on tonight." But because they did love him so much, they did not listen to the tears of the moment because they wanted to see the laughter of a lifetime. And that, ladies and gentlemen, really what love is all about, because you see, so many of us as parents are reluctant to do for the child what is best for the child because we fear that child then might withhold his love from us, not knowing that over the long haul, the best way to guarantee his love is to demonstrate ours by acting in his best interest. I tell the story of David Lochte because it involves so many of the principles in which I believe. They had a beautiful relationship with others. The doctors and the nurses, you see, they all had a part. The therapists all had a part. You don't climb the high mountain by yourself. It is in conjunction with others that we really accomplish the major things in life. That's why I like to tell the story of David Lochte, because it's a story of cooperation. I tell the story because it's a story of goals, of big goals, of lifetime goals, of monthly goals, weekly goals, hourly goals even, ladies and gentlemen. I tell the story of David Lochte because it involves so much in attitude. You talk about attitude. This boy, since he was too small to carry it, used to have his own cassette player. And every day that little mind was fed with the good, the clean, the pure, the powerful, the positive messages over and over and over. You can do it, son. You can do it. See, we live in such a negative world that unless we deliberately read the good books daily, unless we deliberately, regularly feed our minds with those motivational recordings that in essence remind us over and over in a negative world that we ourselves can be positive if we have the positive input. And yes, I tell the story of David Lochte because I believe it has so much to do with one of those things that so many times we as individuals have a tendency to overlook. It's a matter of curiosity, and I'm almost through. Of course, you know, when us Baptists say finally, that don't necessarily mean immediately.